Hi, everyone. All right. So, today we are talking about getting beyond our brain. And I am incredibly, I don't know what the word is. You could say excited. I think another word is just eager to share this with you. And the reason is so often we can get stuck in our heads in a way that we don't know we're stuck. Things that our brain tells us are important or urgent or required or necessary or needed aren't always that way. But we can get so wound up in that survival mentality, that way our brain evolved, that we stop ourselves from actually considering, is this really what I want? Is this really where I'm headed? And so that is why I am so eager today to share with you, because we're talking about how to get beyond that part of our brain, how to evolve past the limits of the survival brain so that we can show up as ourselves, make decisions from that place of what we want, not what we think we have to do, and thrive, not just survive in our life. And so this week, this Lunch and Learn is all about that. And so if you haven't had a chance to watch the previous week's Lunch and Learns, I do recommend that you go back and do that. You don't need to do it right now to be able to get insight and information out of this one, but I do recommend you go back and take a look, because these are building upon each other. And a lot of what we talk about today will be the next layer into what we set up last week. And so this way you're continually stacking your knowledge on top of itself so that you can come to this whole new way of being and showing up. Okay, so that is what we are doing today. So, thank you for all who are here live, and also hello to all of you watching the replay. This is highly valuable use of your time, because you will be learning new ways to approach your brain so that you can get closer to what you're wanting and do it from a place that feels better. Okay, so to get going, the bottom line here is we can think beyond that primitive brain. And to set that up, we're first going to do a very quick recap of the three motives that our brain evolved with. And then we'll talk about just high level the five strategies to get beyond that. And then we'll dive into each. And that way you'll leave not only knowing these five new ways to think, but also having ideas for how to help yourself operate in those places right now. Okay, so what are the three motives our brain evolved with? All right, so we talked about this last week, so we'll do a quick refresher here. The first is to avoid pain. In the cave people times, we wanted to avoid danger at all costs because it was lurking around every corner, and we needed to stay safe so we could survive and continue as a species. And so we were always thinking about, how do we avoid pain? How do we get out of danger? The next motive we want to talk about here is seeking pleasure. And when we think about seeking pleasure, this is the way our brain evolved to keep us alive. Because if we just avoid pain and that was our only motive, we would just sit in the cave all day and starve and die. So we needed a little more a little more motivation to stay alive than to just avoid pain. So that's why our brain evolved with this motive to seek pleasure. And that means it's looking for that short term pleasure fix. And that might be through sugar from a berry. It might be through a praise or a recommendation or a positive appraisal from somebody, because that shows that you have a tribe that's there to support you so you can stay alive. It might be through simple pleasures. I mean, just think of drugs, sex, alcohol. All of those things are those seeking pleasure that our brain evolved from a short term focus. The other motive that our brain evolved with is to conserve energy, because we, as caved men and women times and people times, we didn't know when we'd get the next meal. So we needed to make sure that we could stay alive long enough to get to the next meal, which meant conserving energy was crucial. And so that often in now times looks like wanting to just sit back and not do anything. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we want to make sure we're using these motives in a way that helps us. So, this is how we evolved. And these motives are helpful to this day because they can still keep us alive. But sometimes they overtake, they become too much of what drives us to the point where instead of keeping us alive, they start to keep us stuck. And so, what we talked about last week was the fact that there's 5 ways to help ourselves evolve beyond these motives. So, yes, we still want to avoid pain and seek pleasure and conserve energy, but we want to think about the reason behind it. And so, what we'll talk about now is diving into those 5 strategies because that'll help us approach our brain from this place of what we want, not what we think we're supposed to do. So, we drive our brain and our behavior instead of our brain driving us. So, what are those 5 motives or 5 ways to live beyond the brain? Comes down to these 5 words, and we'll dive into each of these and how to make that shift. So it's being long term focused, it's being about thriving, it's being about growth, it's being about what you want, and it's being about strategy. When we can be and approach life from this place, we're not stuck and sucked into a forever um, evolutionary mindset that's just about avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and conserving energy. We're actually living life and growing and learning and evolving in a way that's helpful for us as an individual. Not as a species necessarily, I mean, also as a species. We won't get all the way into that today, but yes, as a whole species and also as an individual. So, how do we do this? How do we make each of these happen? Because, yes, they sound nice, but execution is often where things get a little wonky. So, that's what we're going to talk about now is how can we do this? So, if we think about this, we'll go down the line here and we'll start with long term. So, what this really means is in the primitive brain, we're short term focused. And the reason we're short term focused is, like we mentioned earlier, we have to survive long enough to procreate, to continue as a species. So everything we do, every decision that we made from this primitive brain is about right now, because right now is the only moment we have. And that is true that right now is the only moment we have. But that doesn't mean we have to completely be consumed by what do I need to do right now? It doesn't have to be this survival approach to it. It doesn't have to be just about this moment with no thought to the future. We can shift to bring the long term into the right now. We can be present minded as we're long term focused. And so, what does that look like? Here's what it is. And I've written just some different ways we can think about this and the question that we can ask ourselves to help ourselves get there. So, short term versus long term. We want to think about, am I in short term gain versus long term repercussions? Or am I in short term loss versus long term gain? How am I approaching the problem? So, if you think about this like making a decision about your next meal. Okay, what do I want for dinner? Well, be really easy to just order some pizza. Short term gain. Boom, done. Get the pizza done, finished. But we're not necessarily thinking about the long term repercussion of that or the long term gain of that. If we order pizza now and that's our short term fix, as opposed to cooking a meal or ordering something else that might take more time and effort and energy, we want to think about, is it worth it? Is me having the short term fix of this pizza right now, immediately, I can get it right now and not have to do much? Is that worth what happens in the long term? So, the way to help ourselves think about this is to think about what are the long term repercussions of this decision? What could go wrong? So, if we think about the pizza example, If I order the pizza, long-term repercussions. Well, it's probably not the healthiest pizza if I'm thinking about where I might be getting that delivered from. A lot of oil, a lot of cheeses, a lot of things on there that I know that I don't personally find to be that healthy for me. Um, so there could be some health consequences long term. I don't feel great for the rest of the evening. It often makes me bloated, harder to think straight, often get tired. Usually, then just turn the TV on, don't do a lot. Um, that's kind of like a long term in terms of the rest of the evening. But then also, we can go longer term and think about 5 years. If I keep making that decision, what happens? It compounds over time and affects our health over time. Okay, so now we know that, but let's also think about the long term gain. If I order the pizza, what's the long term gain here? Well, I might be excited for a moment to have the pizza and get to eat the pizza, and I wouldn't have to spend my energy doing other things. So then I could use that energy maybe to work on something else, but I also know that when I have the pizza, I usually don't want to work on other things. And so you can see here through the thought process, I don't see a lot of long term gain. Now, maybe if it's an experience with my family, I want to reward myself, I want to show myself, hey, it's time to celebrate. And celebration matters, that could have a long term gain. So, what you need to do is you need to think about your reason behind the decision you've made. Am I making it from a place of a decision that I like? Am I making it because it's easy and I don't want to think about the future? And do I like that reason? Or am I making it because I want to celebrate and bring that more into the future? And do I like that reason? Why am I making this decision? So it's like a pro and con, but where you're bringing in the long-term perspective to see what you win and potentially could lose from that decision. That will help you see, is it worth it? So that'll help you decide and get out of just only a short-term focus, bring the long-term in and then decide from there. Because there's also the short-term loss. If I don't order the pizza and I make a meal, it takes a lot more time. I lose that time. Is that loss worth the potential long-term gain? It might be, considering wherever you're at in your situation. So you always want to bring the two perspectives together so that you can help yourself. Okay. So that is what we can do for this strategy. The next strategy is we want to go from surviving to thriving because our brain didn't evolve for us to be happy. It evolved to keep us alive. So we need to bring the happy, the joy, the thriving mentality. How do we do that? We can ask ourselves, am I in stay in the cave thinking? Am I just about survival here? What I need to do, what I must do, what's next? How do I live? How do I go on? Or is there opportunity to thrive? Or am I in real danger? Sometimes we are in real danger. We are in survival mode. We want to stay alive. If the only thing available to us to eat, if we bring the pizza example back, were pizza, and that's all that I could see coming, I don't know when the next meal is, I'm going to eat. I need to survive. Am I in real danger? Maybe if I'm starving and I haven't had a meal in a while, it would be the decision I'd want to make. So you want to ask yourself, is there real danger? And I think about this too when, as a woman walking through a parking lot in the dark by myself, am I in real danger here? How can I help myself in this situation where maybe there could be somebody out there that could attack? How can I help myself not stay in the cave, but also consider my surroundings? What can I do to help? How can I help myself through that so I can thrive? What would thriving look like? Would it mean that I never go out because there always could be somebody in the parking lot that could attack? No, I'm probably going to want to go out because that would if I just stayed in, that's mean survival stay in the cave. I'm not letting myself thrive at all. It's kind of like, yes, you're safe in the cave or you're not in the parking lot where somebody could attack you, but you're kind of dying on the inside because you're not getting out or doing anything. So you want to think about, how can I thrive? How can I take this appreciation of wanting to survive and bring the thrive with it? Another question I like to ask myself here is, am I hungry, thirsty, tired, or physically injured? Because sometimes when I'm making a decision, I I literally have a biology, or I guess physiology, that isn't helping me. If I'm really hungry, I know it's not a good time to decide what to do next in my business because I'm starving. I'm hungry. Like, my brain is in such a survival mode, it's hard to separate. So, what do? How can I get to thrive? I might literally stop and eat, or I might take a walk, or I might have some water. I might go to the bathroom. I notice sometimes I'll get anxious and I literally have to go to the bathroom. So if I go to the bathroom, come back to my business, I can approach it from a whole new fresh perspective. So you want to ask yourself, how can I thrive? And also consider, is there real danger here? And marrying those two together will help you use what we evolved to have, that primitive brain, and go beyond it so we can also thrive. Okay, next strategy, fixed versus growth. What we want to do is get out of a fixed, rigid mentality into a growth mindset. And this is in Carol Dweck's book about growth mindset. So for anyone who hasn't read it, I do recommend that. And what I've done here is put some ways to approach this. So you really, for growth mindset, you're a forever student. You're a learner. You're in that learning mentality. You're in direct growth mindset. So how do you help see which mindset you're in? Fixed is, am I looking for a right versus wrong way? When we stay stuck in that fixed, what's right, what's wrong, what's win, what's lose. We get really into the one way. It can get us into perfectionism. It can make it hard for us to make any decisions or take action because we think there's a one way, a one right way. So ask yourself, am I stuck in a right versus wrong mentality? Or could it be a win win? Could it be that any option could be right here and then I can move forward? Now, there are some decisions where it really doesn't feel like there's a right and wrong. You think, if I make the wrong move, something terrible could happen. And depending on the decision, there might be some repercussions. So it's not that there's never uh, a better way. But when we think about it in what's right and what's wrong, it doesn't allow us to access the way that we want, the way that can help us. Instead, we want to think about, okay, if all options are on the table here and any one of them could work, how could this be a win win? How could I help myself decide? How could I get creative here? How do I want to approach this? What can I learn here? And this also comes down to, when things don't go the way you intend, how can I learn from the failure, not use it to mean I can't do it, I suck, it's never going to work, and instead use it to say, okay, that didn't work. What can I learn? What will I do different? How can I adjust? What might I try next time? And in that way, you're continually evolving and learning, and you're not staying stuck. Okay. The next strategy for us to talk about, this one I hear often. It's being stuck in this should brain. And I like to think of the word should as a swear word, as a word that you don't want to say, that has damage to it. Because when you say should, it's like you're supposed to do something. And if I bring up even my questions here, you want to get out of supposed to and into want to. Because if you should do it, it gets fixed, it gets rigid, it gets stuck, it gets to like no sense of want or well-being or thriving or where you're headed or long-term vision. It's just what you should do. We don't have to worry about should if we don't want to. We can go into wants. We can think about what we want, because there is truly nothing we have to do. We were not born with a manual attached to us that says these are the things that you should do in this life. It doesn't exist. So there's nothing we have to do. There is nothing we have to do. Nothing has to matter unless we want it to matter. So let's help ourselves get out of the stuckness of the word should or must or need to or have to or supposed to or required, and instead shift into, what do I want? How do I want to be? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What matters to me? What do I see as next for me? How do I want to approach this? What could work for me? How do I see this going? And is that how I want to think about it? You can always shift into want if you want to. So think about what you want. Help yourself separate from the supposed to and the shoulds, remove the rules, and see what comes. Okay. The last strategy here that I want us to talk about is urgency to strategy. And we've touched on this a little bit already, so we'll go quick here. But urgency often feels like a rushing. And again, it brings us to that question again, is there true danger? Is there actual danger? Or those biology needs, do I have to pee? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? Am I physically hurt? If we can adjust for those and see, okay, actually, no, maybe there's no real danger here. How can I remove the urgency? Because often what we find is slowing down can be the quickest way. Because when we're in this rushing fire of it, in the short term, we get solution, we get things done. But in the long term, we burn out. And we don't always get great results from burning out, right? So we want to think away from this urgency now, have to keep moving, go, 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 and into strategy. And if we think about that, what that looks like is, what's the purpose here? Where am I really trying to head? Where am I wanting to head? That question can help us get out of the urgency of, but I have to do this, and into, wait a minute, but where am I going? Is that where I want to go? Is that what I'm wanting right now? And then your brain might say something like, oh, no, 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 but we don't have time to think about that. First, we got to do this thing. And when you hear that and you know you're not in physical danger, you can say, okay, wait a minute. Nothing's actually going wrong in this moment. And yes, there might be things that happen based on what I decide. But instead of staying in this urgency, must decide, which isn't going to help you decide and actually will slow you down, you can get into strategy. What's the purpose? What's the focus? Lighten that pressure from yourself, because then you'll actually be able to decide and move forward and have some momentum. Because we block our momentum when we're in urgency, because we end up in this start stop mode where we're constantly getting hit by another brick wall, whether that brick wall be the next problem that our brain wants to like freak out over, or our own tiredness and exhaustion from the physical and emotional overwhelm we put ourselves in from always being in this adrenaline rush urgency. So we help ourselves shift into strategy to get beyond the primitive brain and into where we want to go. Okay, so those are the ways to get beyond the brain, to think in a way that helps us. And again, it's being long term, it's thriving, it's growth, it's thinking about those wants and using strategy to guide us forward. So that's what I have for you today. And again, the bottom line here isn't that the ways that we evolve, those three motives of avoid pain, seek pleasure, conserve energy, those aren't bad. But when we only use those, we become narrowly driven. And when we don't know we're using them, we become this person just reacting to our brain instead of leading our brain. So we can get beyond those motives, get beyond that part of our brain, and be the one driving by using these strategies. And if you want to dive deeper, if you're thinking, hey, this is me, I would love to go more, to really get to feel what's going on in my head and my brain, then I encourage you to sign up for a call with me. This is a free call. And so, for those of you who feel set, you're not interested, thank you so much for being here. Please go ahead and sign off now. And for those of you who are interested and wanting to learn more about this free opportunity, stay on. We'll talk for just a couple more minutes and I'll share what this can look like for you. So, what this is it is a call where you and I are on the phone together, one on one, and it is focused on you and your brain. And what we'll do is we'll talk about your confidence blockers, the things that are stopping you from accessing you. It's often those primitive brain things that we don't notice are happening, that we're stuck in, that are keeping us in this one spot and we're not able to progress. So we'll talk about what those are and they show up a little bit differently in today's world. They're not as obvious as, "Oh, I want food. I'm looking to conserve energy." It doesn't look like that. It's a little more secret in a different way that our brain words it. It often sounds very logical and rational, but is still keeping us stuck. And so, what we want to do is identify what those are specific to you so we can overcome them. So, we'll do that on the call. We'll identify what some of those blockers are for you. Then, we'll talk about what your goal is, whether it's for your career or somewhere else. Sometimes we aren't really sure what we want, or we know what we want, but we haven't articulated it fully to ourselves, or we have a goal and we've written it down, but it doesn't feel real yet. And so this call will help that come to life wherever you're at in that place of your goal. When you work with a coach on a phone call with me, you start to see it in a new way. It starts to be real, something you can grasp, touch, feel, hold on to, something you can create a fire of passion around, something that feels possible. So we'll talk about that on this call together. And then we'll talk about a roadmap because we're in this place in our life and we want to get to that goal. What are the steps? Now, of course, we can't go into the details of every single step, but we will talk about what the overarching themes are for you to build that path at that high level for how to get to that goal. And then we will go over what it would look like to get additional support. So we've built the roadmap on this call. We've talked about the goal. We've identified what's stopping you. But we often need support along the way. We need to dive into the details of that roadmap. We need to know specific to your brain the obstacles that it's presenting at a deep level. And you often can benefit from ongoing support because our brain continually finds new problems. And we want to help ourselves use those problems, those obstacles, and make them into solutions. But if we're stuck in our own head and seeing it as a problem, we can't do that. And so that's where coaching can be so helpful. And so this consult call is a free call. And at the end of it, we will talk about additional support for coaching, which is a paid for program. So you can get help in going through ongoing over several months period, how to help yourselves overcome the obstacles you're putting in front of you. We see a problem and we think we know the problem, but often there's a problem underneath that problem. That's the actual problem. But we're so focused on this problem, we don't see that problem. So we need a coach or something, some outside thing to help us see our brain in a different way, to observe our brain instead of being stuck in our brain. So that's what coaching does. And we'll talk about what that can look like for you if it seems like a good fit for you on this call. So, again, this is a free call. It's for those who are ready to dive in and take their confidence, their career to that next level. They're wanting to know what's stopping them. They're wanting to talk about that goal and they're ready to create a roadmap forward. And so, this call can help you do that. Whether or not coaching is for you, I do recommend you get on this call because you will leave with takeaways and insights no matter what. And you will discover whether or not coaching is the decision for you. My goal on these calls is never to get you to say yes to my program, it's always to help you decide what is best for you, whatever that may be. And so, as a coach, That is my mission in life, is to help you take charge of your life, to make decisions from that empowered place of what you want, what's best for you. I can't possibly know what's best for you, but you do. But when we get stuck in our own way, we can't often access it. And so this call will help you to access that part of you so you can decide forward. All right. Thank you so much for joining. To schedule a call, what you do is you go to lisaphilia.com/schedule. That's LISAPHILYAW.com/schedule. And you can schedule your call there. Thank you so much. And remember, you can live beyond your primitive brain. Thank you. Bye.